guys, welcome to another episode of Tech Tuesday. I love AI. I love talking about AI. I love, even best of all, when AI technology is really working to make the lives of people who live and work in senior living better. That's what we are talking about today with Henri, with Teton, and Brenda Martinez with Sagora Senior Living. And you notice I didn't use Henri's last name because I would not be able to pronounce it. But before we get started on our conversation, this. Hey guys, Steve Moran here. So we're going to get into who you are in a minute, but I want to start with this really big question to start with. Brenda, you had this pilot that you did, and in the first month, you had this insane number of 74% reduction in falls. I'm just, it's almost unbelievable. What happened? How did that happen? Were things terrible before? Or talk to me about that.
Well, that's a great question. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks for having us today to talk about this. I would say yes, the falls were reduced pretty significantly after a month and then continued to reduce after that. Were they terrible to begin with? I think they were typical for, senior living communities without any type of falls identification or in-room access outside of a physical person needing to go in and check. So indeed, the results were really good. And that's just one of the metrics that we were looking at. And I'm looking forward to talking about more. But yeah, reduce the falls.
That is super impressive. As my audience knows, you may know, I am the family caregiver for my 93-year-old stepfather with dementia, and he's in a small residential home. And we went through a period of like 4 falls in 3 weeks or something like that. And there was somebody instantly there, and so no long-term damage, but it's an area that I'm just I think about constantly for him and constantly for the industry. Brenda, I'm going to stick with you for just one more second. I want to actually back up a little bit and talk about Sagora and how big you are and what you do, what your special sauce is, and then Henri, we're going to come to you and Teton. Not forgetting you.
Well, I'm Brenda Martinez. I am the Vice President of Resident Services for Sagora Senior Living. Sagora Senior Living is, I think we have 95 communities across the United States, independent living, assisted living, and memory care. We are primarily in Texas, and that's where we are actually, our home office is based.
Do you have sort of a secret sauce?
I think our secret sauce is, our philosophy of putting residents first. It's really embedded in who we are as an organization. It's been longstanding how we approach the business. If it's right for the residents, if it's best for the residents and puts them first, then it's best for our company.
Terrific. I love that. Henri, let's talk a little bit about Teton. Who is Teton? What is Teton? I hear Teton and I think mountains.
That is indeed where the name came from. Thank you, Steve, for inviting me here. I'm delighted to be joining Brenda to talk about what we've been doing at Sagora. Teton really was started in Europe 6 years ago, initially in Denmark, and we moved to the US last year with really one focus. We're trying to solve one problem, which is the problem around data and visibility inside a community. Like today, caregivers really have a lot on their plate and they can't capture detailed information about resident 24/7. And so Teton does that for them. We passively track a lot of information about the residents, how they're doing, how they're sleeping, how they're moving, how they're breathing. So we understand each resident in real time and we understand the care that they're receiving. And we do that without any wearables and in a very privacy first way that is truly unique, I think. And what I mean by privacy first is we have an AI solution that processes all of the data within the room, within the apartment. The raw data never leaves the building, and no human ever reviews the raw data. And that's a big difference. So effectively, we're creating a digital twin, if you want, of the community. And what I mean by digital twin, it's a living replica of your community, what's happening inside that. But as data, it's digital. And so you can query that data set if you want to help understand, answer question about your residents, about the care delivered, and use that data to solve problems. So, we talked about falls. That was the first, I guess, the most natural place to start is like once you have data on residents, you can not only identify falls, which is very important, but that's only reactive. What we built is a fall management solution that really takes all of these learnings on each residence and try to be more proactive, helps you prevent falls by giving those insights to staff in real time and say, hey, resident Mary in room 201 is at risk and she's in a situation where she may need some help. So go intervene, help her, and help prevent those incidents. But falls is just one aspect. Sorry.
Yeah. So you have opened up so many questions for
I know.
me. I'm gonna actually back up here a little bit. I want to come back to this fall reduction that Brenda talked about, because it's one thing to be able to and we're going to come back to the technology, but detection doesn't by itself reduce falls. So talk to me how the technology helped you actually reduce falls. I feel like we've got a disconnect there.
Yeah, totally. And I'm glad you circled back around on that, because you're right. The technology tells us that something happened to a resident. But when this technology, this AI is in each resident's apartment, it really tells us what happened to that resident. What was the root cause for that resident's fall, so that we can modify the environment. We can, check the medications that they're taking, check their footwear, make sure that, we're being proactive in, assisting them to the bathroom in the middle of the night when we identify that they get up to go to the bathroom at 2:00 every morning. So we're going to get in there at 1:50 and help the resident go. So it's that type of view into the apartments that gives us all of that intel that we need to help identify why is the resident falling and what can we do to prevent it.
So I really, really like this a lot. Henri, I'm an operator. I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, yeah, I want us to do fall detection prevention. Everybody is selling that. But I'm also really intrigued by the idea that you're collecting all this data. So let's talk a little bit about the technology behind the collection of data, what that looks like. You talked about privacy. I'd like to, maybe if we have time, we'll dig a little bit into the privacy issue. I'm probably a contrarian on privacy. I think it's an illusion that nobody really has any privacy anyway. So anyway, but talk to me a little bit about the technology and how you get this data and how you use it beyond fall detection.
Sure, happy to. So the way the tech actually works is that you have sensors that are ceiling mounted, and they're connected to an edge computing unit. Basically, that's what we call the brain. Think like a mini computer that you have in every room that processes the input from the sensor and recreate that three-dimensional copy, if you want, of the room, of the environment, of the resident, and of the staff when they're interacting in the room. That's the data we're creating. All of our IP, all of the work from our engineers and AI scientists are into, they're in this box, basically. They're in the algorithms that analyze an image and transform that into data about the residents and the room.
Okay. And then what happens with that data, and what else can I learn? How else can it help me besides fall detection?
I think the core, and you'll see it flows into a lot of what we do, but the core of what the AI does is understanding each resident individually, understanding their behavior, how they're sleeping, their mobility, their breathing rates as well. We're estimating that. And so you're building a picture of every resident, how they're behaving and whether that behavior is changing from their normal baseline. So for example, is this resident doing a lot better or a lot worse than their typical range? And that's useful information for the caregivers to understand the resident better, but also adjust the care plans accordingly. So I can give you an example to make it a bit more concrete. We had a resident, actually, Brenda, you know that example, where it was a lady who was quite tired in the afternoon when or during the day when her son would come and visit her. And the natural, like, immediate reaction was like, she's not sleeping well. We probably need to increase her sleep meds so she get good quality of sleep at night. And the resident services director in that community went to Teton, looked at the sleep data of that resident, and realized that she was napping a lot in the afternoon. And so at night, when she would go to bed, she wasn't falling asleep and not getting a good night of sleep. And that knowing that, they were able to adjust her care plan and basically increase the level of engagement and activity in the afternoon to prevent her from napping, which resulted in the resident getting back to a healthy, normal, like nighttime sleeping patterns. I think the most incredible.
Medications.
Sorry?
Without medications.
Without medication, actually, yeah. I was going to say we saw, I think it was 83 or 86% reduction in the PRN that this resident was taking in 6 weeks, just by knowing.
So, Brenda, I want to come to you, and I want to really dig deep into how your team is actually using this data. I love the story about the sleep patterns and all that kinds of thing. But it sounds like it's that the staff has still got to be pretty proactive and go in and say, okay, what's going on here? Is there automatic? I mean, how do you make this work without it creating this huge burden on staff?
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked that, Steve, because I think one of the most impactful components of this system for me as an operator, I've been in the industry for a long time as a nurse, and one of the challenges that we have in the industry is, how do you stay on top of residents' changes in condition? How do you adjust the care plans accordingly when something's going on? And as with normal aging process, things just kind of decline slowly over time. You don't suddenly have a huge change of condition. And so today we may be providing standby assistance for a shower. A month from now, we're providing some hands-on assist, and we're also assisting the resident, in the bathroom, on the toilet. And those are things that happen subtly over time that the caregivers don't remember to notify us about or change. So this is really our nurse, our caregiver, in every resident's apartment saying, oh, someone's in here assisting the resident with dressing. And oh, by the way, it's not taking 15 minutes like, you have it care planned. It's taking a half an hour to assist this resident. And so what we've been able to additionally identify is that, we had some significant variances in our levels of care, what we should have been providing the resident versus what was in the care plan that we were providing the resident. There was a mismatch. And this really helped us get back on track with, what do the residents really need? When do the residents really need it? And then delivering services. So one of the outcomes that I didn't anticipate in this was that we had less frequent visits to the residents, but longer duration of time. So more care and more targeted interactions with the residents during those periods of time.
Okay, so do you get regular notifications of changes? Who gets that? How does that work? What triggers those things?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah, please.
I'll give an example. So there's different ways to interact with the data, different interfaces. We have a mobile application that frontline care team members are carrying with them. That is a very simple app, because to your point, we need to drive adoption, we need to drive usage, and there's varying levels of digital fluency across the caregivers. And so we have a very simple, very visual app that helps them understand in real time, this resident needs me now, and helps guide them to the most urgent situations. And then you have for your executive director or your resident services director and the nurses in the community, a desktop-based version of the app. So it's a bigger, a richer interface that has a lot of the information that we were talking about, identifying across the entire community where discrepancies might be between care delivered versus care assessed. That's there, and that's accessible to just those users. And that platform, it's kind of, we built it in a way where if you have 5 minutes a day to look at it, there's an AI agent that scraps all of the data, looks at what has changed in the last 24 hours and tells you, hey, this is what you need to know. But if you have time to dig into it, it's very rich and lets you explore and look at individual resident and do root cause analysis on each of them.
And how does it interact with your EHR or EMR system?
So, yeah, it is linked in.
Yeah.
Okay. Talk to me a little bit about privacy. Brenda, you're on the front lines with people. Do people worry about, am I right that people don't really care about privacy that much anymore? Or do I have this completely wrong? And how do you address that? Or does it come up?
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And I tend to be on the side of the fence as you are on this matter. The more information we can have about our residents, and it's private. We don't see the actual residents. We see pixelated versions of the residents. So, but enough that we're able to figure out what's going on and what the resident needs. I was a caregiver to both my mother and my father, a year or 2 years ago, and having insights into what was going on with them would have been, incredibly helpful. The other thing with the, sorry, I was just reminiscing about them. The other thing about oh, sorry, go ahead. I'll let Henri take over.
Okay. So I think it was your platform where I see you talk about a big reduction in nighttime staff levels of workload. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, happy to. So at night, the biggest impact we're going to have on workload, and I wouldn't say on staff, and I'll explain the distinction here, is that we allow the nighttime crew to basically check on the resident digitally through our app. So for example, if someone is sleeping, you can check on them, see how long they've been asleep for, their respiration rate, and you don't have to do your rounding by physically entering the room and taking the risk of waking them up, which is a big plus, especially when you're looking at residents that have cognitive decline or dementia. The quality of their sleep is so important. And so because you're able to do that on the app, you actually don't need to physically walk throughout the entire building. And that frees time to be either more responsive to dangerous situations, like, for example, a resident wandering in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. But the reality is, I think, very often the teams are pretty stretched. It's rare that operators are operating at very high staffing ratio at night. And so it's more making sure you're not in that constant, like, reactive, stressful situation. It's very much appeasing the community and allowing them to be just providing better care versus running around trying to solve, reacting, fighting fires.
Yeah, I really like this a lot, because I think that the stress of, it would feel bad. You'd be embarrassed as a caregiver, as an organization, to find out that somebody had fallen and been on the floor or in the bathroom for several hours, right? And yet you don't want to be disruptive of their sleep. And so it's this huge challenge, this balance you're trying to hit. Brenda, you started to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to circle back around now that I'm composed. Wanted to circle back around on the privacy piece, because that is really important, and a lot of people ask about that. The seniors themselves, actually, they're less concerned about the privacy. They are most fearful of falling and injuring themselves to the point where they can't come back to their assisted living. So they're all about, like, if somebody can keep an eye on me, or if someone gets notified if something's going on with me, then so much the better. We were actually concerned about their adult children, who might have been more concerned about privacy and all of that. But as I was going to say about being an adult child myself, having those insights is more important than knowing that, mom's in there, on the toilet or, whatever she's doing. It's more important for me to know that she's safe, that everybody has a view into her when they need it so that they can act accordingly.
Yeah, and I'm very much the same way about that. So, Brenda, I want to dig a little deeper into sort of the implementation process, and to do that, I want to actually take a step back. How does Sagora look at and evaluate technology? I mean, I go to probably more trade shows, senior living trade shows a year than just about anybody, and I walk the exhibit floors at some of the big national events, and it seems like every two-thirds of the companies are selling technology something, and most of them have slapped the label AI on, even if there's not much AI involved. I know, Henri, you got real AI there, so I'm no slam against you on this. but you could spend a small fortune on technology. How do you guys go about just thinking about technology, looking at it, and making technology decisions? And then I want to come back and go from there, use that as a foundation to talk a little bit about the implementation process, how your staff reacted when you first rolled this out.
Yeah, so I think what we're looking at is, from a clinical perspective, what problem are we trying to solve? And that's the first thing that we ask about the technology. What problem are we trying to solve? In this case, it was falls. But as you mentioned, there's lots of falls technology out there. What technology is available that is not invasive, that doesn't require wearables, that doesn't require a lot of time and attention for us to stay on top of things, to know that something is going on? And so actually our VP of revenue, ancillary revenue, came back from a conference and said, hey, there's this really cool technology I think can meet your need and can also meet my need. And when you can have that happen, that's a win-win. And so I said, well, let's meet with them and let's see. I'm suspicious because I'm always suspicious about, these things that are told to us. But after having looked at the technology and what they were capable of, we said, okay, let's do this pilot and let's see if you can actually do what you say you can do. You can identify, ancillary revenue opportunities. You can help us reduce our falls. You can increase, decrease our response times, all of those things. So those are the metrics. We always start off with, what are we trying to solve? What do those metrics look like? And then our pilots actually, then measure those things over time.
Can you talk to me? So let's talk a little bit about implementation and how your staff reacted, how long it took you to get up and going. And then I want to talk a little bit more about the business case and revenue. And I'd like to talk a little bit about how families reacted. Is it helpful in sales and marketing? Is it a problem? So I know that I'm throwing a lot at you once, but let's start with your staff and how you walk in one day and say, hey, we've got this brand new technology that's going to make your life wonderful. And they roll their eyes and go, oh yeah, another piece of tech. I mean, that's the reality of what happened, right?
Absolutely. It absolutely. And honestly, I'm very mindful of that, because for me, I'm like, okay, great. Another dashboard I get on, throughout my day and, look at data. But you do have to be mindful. These are the persons who are directly interfacing with our residents. And so, what is most important, I think, is that it's technology that they can use, that's easy, that's intuitive. And a lot of our caregivers today, they do leverage technology in their everyday lives. So it's a lot easier for them than when I first started. And so they use, the phones and laptops and all of those things to access. Then we had a discussion with them about, this is what we want to do. And our caregivers, they love the residents. And so they anything that can help them respond to a resident more quickly, prevent a resident from falling, give a resident what they need, they're going to be all on board with it, as I mentioned, as long as it's easy technology for them to use. And so we didn't have a very difficult discussion in getting the team on board. They were pretty excited. And we met with the entire team. We met with the family members. We met with the residents all together and said, this is what we're thinking. What are you concerned about? And, for the most part, most of the residents, families, and team members, they were excited. They were really interested in having that greater insight.
Yeah, I can really see those benefits. What about outside the room? Do you track residents in the common areas, in the corridors, or is it strictly limited to rooms and bathrooms?
So right now at Sagora, it's limited to the apartment of the resident, but we have launched full community mapping that gives you visibility when they go to communal area as well.
Okay, terrific. What about, are you seeing any impact in terms of your sales and marketing? Are your team members talking about that? Do people like it? Does it help?
Yeah, so one of the things that we do now is, as part of the tour route, we kind of show them, we do a demonstration of the system and have them understand what it is. And again, this is a great time for our industry because a lot of family members are tech savvy and they're looking for these types of technologies in senior living communities. And so saying that, we have this and then we show them how it works, they appreciate that. We've actually, as part of the pilot, that was one of the things that we asked our executive directors and our sales directors, what part of the Teton system helped you close that deal? Was it, yes, you have this, like, I'm only coming here because you have this system, no one else does. Is it, yes, it definitely played a part in choosing you over someone else. And we actually discovered that it actually did drive some sales into the community, which is one of those financial indicators of success, right?
So that's a good starting place for the ROI, but I want to get a little deeper on the financial case for this. I assume the system costs money to buy. So a CFO is looking at this and says, tell me why I should buy this. I think resident care is nice and preventing falls is nice, but what's it going to do for me? What's it do for my bottom line? Talk to me about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. I feel like that's pretty much part of every discussion that we have in this industry. How is this going to benefit the bottom line? And that was what we looked at. If we can reduce falls, and we looked at the data that said, how many falls have we typically had in this community over the course of the year that wound up resulting in the resident needing to go to the hospital and then moved out because the injury was so severe. And then we looked at, okay, how many falls have we prevented by using this system, and backed into that data. And we were able to reduce fall related move outs by about $110,000 in terms of people, about 8.8 residents a year. We were able to retain. So there's 110 in this bucket. And then we looked at, okay, level of care, which again, I've always said, if we can figure that out, we win. How do you stay on top of change of condition for our residents? And in 1 month, we were able to identify about $10,000 in one community that we weren't collecting and subsequently staffing accordingly to care for those residents. So, that's another $120,000 a year. And then, looking at, what the move-in impact is, even if we have, half a resident a month who decides to move in because of this technology, although we've seen the number higher than that, then, we're looking at about $150,000 a year. So you're looking at almost $500,000 in, operational expense control and revenue generation that pays for itself.
So that's a really compelling case. Henri, you're selling on frankly what's a really crowded marketplace right now. There are a lot of people with fall detection, a lot of people with sensors. As you're talking to people, you guys have done some funding. You are obviously seeing some real success. Why are people picking you versus other technologies?
I think it's for what Brenda just outlined. I think everyone has tried a lot of technologies out there and they help you, but it was very hard to tie a compelling ROI that justifies scaling the technology across the entire community or the entire portfolio. Bear in mind, most people are focused on memory care. We do entire communities, assisted living and memory care beds. And I think it's really that difference. They see the power of the tool. They see how it's helping deliver not only clinical outcomes, but very clear financial outcomes. And that justifies the conversation and exploring basically rolling out Teton.
Terrific. This has been super helpful. We are about out of time here. Just quickly, Henri, I'd like to have you just sort of give your 30-second elevator pitch for the company and how people find you, and then Brenda will close out with you in a minute.
Well, it's really here to help you solve, problems of visibility into what happens in your community. Once we know what's happening, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And so that's the first step. Let's create visibility and then help you improve your operations. You can find us at teton.ai, and it was a real pleasure joining you on Foresight today.
Thank you for joining us. And Brenda, thank you very much. Any last words about the system and technology and Sagora?
Yeah, I think, Sagora is definitely committed to these technologies, and any way that we can get greater insights into our residents' needs and deliver on our resident first philosophy, we're all about it.
Terrific. Thank you so much for joining us. Jada, thank you for producing in the background, and we will be back on Friday with another great leadership show. Have a great week.
Thank you.